Hello and welcome to the first code along I've ever done. I just wanted to show how easy it is to build with TailwindCSS, especially as a back-end guy, experienced with Laravel and back-end development. I've never done front-end or not done much front-end, and Tailwind has made it very easy for me to get layouts looking like this. This took roughly 45 minutes to build. I was inspired by a dribble shot. The link will be in the description. And I really enjoy using Tailwind, so I will show you how to take this to this in no time at all. So let's get started. First thing you'll notice when you look at the file is the only actual CSS I've written, and not really written, but copied off a gradient site, is the purple gradient that you see in the background here. In the final product, you see that the gradient stretches the whole way down. Here it's repeated. That's because the body tag has nothing in it other than this content here, and it's the minimum height of body should be the screen size. So we can do that simply by doing min h screen. As you can see, it's fixed, very easy. And now if the content is longer than the page, it'll just automatically stretch that gradient even further down. I've also added the Lado font from Google Fonts, and I have the regular and the bold one. And that should be enough for us. So if we continue down, just as a quick overview, I have the header, the main form area, this like call to action sign up thing, and the footer. And so here you see a header. This is where the form is going to be, the call to action, and the footer. Very simple. I thought this was the best way to lay it out, and it seems to work quite well. So if we get started, I'm looking at a file on my other screen, that the completed file, just for reference, so don't forget anything. I see that at the top here I started with adding a padding of 12, and because this is a mobile first framework CSS, this padding is going to work on mobile. If I wanted to make it a different padding for any like desktop version of the site, I could just do md pt20, and that will make the top of this have greater padding than the mobile version. This login form rather, will be mobile responsive, and I'll show you that after. If we add a padding bottom of 6 and see what that looks like, you'll see that, oops, well, you won't see that because that's below the footer. And then adding px2, which is left and right padding, and removing that padding for the desktop version will give us this effect here, where it's going to be in the middle anyway, so it doesn't matter. But on mobile, you want the white to have some space on both sides so it looks better. So that's that here. If we continue down, I can show you that if I add BG white here, you can see that every section within body is full width of the page. Typically, you'll see people using container. To leave that container, which will make it that predetermined width, and MX Auto to center it. Because our login form is not wide, this is the completed version, it's not wide at all, we can just, instead of using container, we can use max width LG, oops, max, and it'll make it that width, which is perfect for our application. That's pretty much all we need for styling the actual header element, but we do need to style the H1 within it. So we can use text for XL, font bold, text white, and text center to get it looking exactly like the finished product. Of course, we will not see the text because there's a white background. If we remove that, you can see that the startup pops up just like the final product does. And now we just need to style the rest of the elements. Continuing down to the main section, what we need to do is create a background of white because the finished product has a white background just in this section. Add another max width of large. Got the A again. MX Auto will center it, so that looks like this. And of course we need padding 8 within this so that there's padding on all sides like that. We actually want this padding to be larger on the desktop version of the site. We want margins on top and bottom of 10 to space it out from the header and the call to action and footer. We want to round the white background, although this rounding is probably not enough, so we can add LG. And of course, this is all included with Tailwind, makes it really great. We can add a shadow of 2XL. So that's one of the bigger, more prominent shadows because this is a big element. I think it looks great this way. And that's it for the classes on the main element. Within it, we can see that the top section here is not styled at all because the text within it just needs to be styled. So we can add font bold and make it text 2XL. That's the size, the font size. And you can see it looks great. It looks exactly how the finished product does. The only issue here we have is that as we go down, we're going to have to pad and add margin to everything to space it out. You'll notice here that this text is actually more gray than black. So to change the color, as you can imagine, is very easy. Just add text gray 700 or 600 rather. Oops. And we added a padding to the top of 2. Looks great. There is no bottom padding on this element because we're going to add padding here. That's going to separate the actual form, not padding margin. It's going to separate the actual form from the text at the top. Styling the form is probably the toughest part because form styling is always a little bit tricky. For the form, we use flex and flex column. What flex column does is basically makes all these elements take up a row themselves. They cannot be side by side. And MX Auto to center it, although in this case I don't think that does anything, so I will not include that. Coming down to the first element, both text elements have div containers. The reason for this is because we want to, in the final product, we actually combine the label with the input. They're not combined, they don't have the same functionality, but they look like they're together. I think it's a great look. So how you do that is you basically put them within the same div, add your margins and paddings. We want the background to be rounded and we want the background to be gray 200. And that looks like so. As you can see, the input is right here. So that's not exactly how we want it to look. To style it the way we want, we have to add block, text gray 700, so it's more subtle, text small, font bold, add a margin bottom of 2 to add a little bit of spacing between this and the input element, and add margin on left and right. Although probably only adding margin to the left will suffice. Nope. Oh, ML3. Whoopsie. There we go. All right, so that looks great apart from the actual input itself. The spacing's right, the background's right, it's rounded. Now we need to style the actual input. So before I do that, I'm just going to copy this and add these classes to the label below it, and I'm going to copy the container classes and add that to the container below that, so they look the same. So styling the input's probably the most difficult. Start with a BG gray. We can round that because, as you notice, these corners are rounded, but the input is not. And then we can do a width full to make it full width. Text gray 700 to make it match the top. So that'll give us a basic look like this, which is great. But here's the thing, we notice that we need to pad it somehow so it's more in the center. And this outline is very annoying, we can't have that. So Tailwind includes these very handy classes. It's not a class, but if you add focus or hover in front, you'll be able to style those actions. So outline none will actually remove this outline, which is great. We want to add a border. If you look in the final product, there's a gray border, a very subtle gray border if it's not clicked, and then it goes purple once it's clicked. And since you can only click one element at a time on a form, only one of them will be purple at a given time. So how we do this is by adding a border bottom. and making it size 4 pixels wide, and giving that border gray 300. So if we look at this version here, we can see that that looks great. Still needs some padding, but the border's there. But we also want it to be purple when it's focused. So focus, focus, border purple 600. That's perfect. You'll notice in the final version there's a transition which makes it look really polished and nice. So if we add transition and a duration of 500, which is how long it takes for the transition to finish, you can see that it works. And lastly, we need to add a left-right padding of 3 and a padding to the bottom of 3. And this should complete the look of the input. Perfect, looks great. We can now copy this and add it to the bottom input. And we should have functional looking form elements. Of course, this will not submit anywhere. Great. Now we can move on to the call to action. The way I styled the call to action is just by using the same width as before, centering it, and actually just making the text center. Because as you see in the final version, oops, actually I'm styling the wrong thing. We need to do forgot your password. So how I styled this is by using flex. As you can see, there's a container div, flex, justify end. What this will do is it'll move the forgot your password to the end. And from here on out, it's very simple, just styling text. So text, SM, small, text, purple, 600. We want to have this text get a little bit darker when someone hovers over it. And we want it to also underline. And we want to give it a margin bottom of 6. And that's just me looking at the completed code on my other monitor. So that's exactly what we're looking for, and it looks great. The next element we need is the button. So buttons are the most fun to style because you can see exactly what you have, basically full control with Tailwind, unlike Bootstrap. So we want to give it a background of purple of 600. You can see that the button already spans the full width like we want. All we need to do is style the text within it, give it a shadow, and make sure that the padding's set up so that the button is wider, more padded on the top and bottom than it is right now. To do that, we add a hover BG purple of 700. Make the text white, make the font bold, and give it a top and bottom padding of 2. Let's see how that looks. Great. You'll notice that it's rounded in the final version, and there's a little bit of transition going on there. So how I did this was add rounded, a large shadow, and on hover, I made the shadow XL. That looks like this, but the transition's a little abrupt, so I added transition and duration 200 because I don't want the duration to take as long as these do. I just want it to be quicker, a little bit more subtle, and that looks great. So that's done. The form itself is done. Now we can get to the click-through. The call to action rather. To style this, I just added the max width large and MX auto to center it. So you can see that that works great. And then text center to center that text. I added a margin top of 12 and a margin bottom of 6 to space it. And then I added text white to this p tag. And that's what that looks like. Of course, we also want the actual call to action sign up button to be bold and to underline when hovered on. And that looks like so. Great. Okay, and the last element we need is the footer. So as you can see, the footer here is on the side where it should be here in white. This is very easy. For this, I just used max width large, MX auto to center it as usual. Text center. Whoops, no, that's the wrong one. For this, actually, we need flex. So flex, and that looks like this. So it adds it here. Let's make it white. And the way to actually put it in the middle here with everything aligned is to add justify center. So that'll center it like this. If we wanted to space it out completely, we could do justify between, but we don't want that. We could also do justify around, which is cool. This is great for menus. But we want center. Oops. And now you'll notice we need space between the elements, because here we have this bullet point, but there's space. So the way this is done is just simply by adding margin left and right of 3 to the bullet point, and it's spaced. And the last thing we need is just to do a hover text underline for both the links. Hover underline. There we go, hover, and it works. And that's the final product. So if we look on the mobile phone view, it looks great. It transitions, it hovers, it adds shadows, buttons work, everything works. If anything, I'd add a little bit of padding here on the bottom, but it looks okay for now, and it looks great. So thank you for watching, and if you're interested in more of these, please subscribe.